Somebody said exhausting. Why have an exhausting weekend? A lot of festivities. Did anybody catch up on rest? No? Okay, awesome. How many of y'all traveled? Y'all went outside? Okay. Everybody else stay here in town? Awesome. Well, I went to Miami for the weekend to see my husband's family, and then we came back and did nothing yesterday, and it was glorious. So that's like the perfect Labor Day. Except I did read like probably almost 200 pages of stuff for my classes over the weekend, so a lot of reading. But other than that, pretty good. So, in regards to this class, where did we leave off on Thursday? Huh? We finished trait theory. So, again, kind of want to make sure we always remember the big picture of what this class is about and what we're doing. We kind of going back to this history, we're studying leadership theory, and we started talking about what influence is, and influence and power bases, right? So like, how do people get other people to do what they want? And then we said, okay, that doesn't really answer all of our questions. So now we're going to look at who people are. So that's what trait theory was all about. And so y'all give me some of the big things that y'all remember about trait theory.
It's about who the leader is.
Who the leader is. So if it's about who the leader is, what does trait theory look at specifically?
Characteristics of the leader.
Characteristics. And then what was the other thing? We could say characteristics or
Strengths.
close. We didn't really talk about strengths in this class, but strengths is a form of this type of assessment that we typically do a lot in leadership.
Personality.
Personality, yes. So we kind of decided that with trait theory, we kind of use those terms interchangeably, right? Personality, characteristics, who the leader is. What is something really important about trait theory that we kind of concluded, or that's concluded in research?
Traits don't change.
They do not change. Okay, that's one big thing, right? So we kind of said you can change a little bit in the short term, but if we're to look at someone's entire lifespan, research has shown that traits don't change. And that's where this idea of personality comes in. You are who you are. So let's figure out, in order for someone to be an effective leader, a good leader, what are those characteristics that someone just has to have? They don't change. What does that also kind of make us assume about trait theory? If it doesn't change and it just, you are who you are, what's an assumption you can make?
It's more of a leaders are born than leaders are learned type of mindset, I guess.
So I would say can't be learned would be another thing. So we can become more aware of who we are, but we can't really learn to be charismatic. We can't really learn to be an extrovert. That's what trait theory says. Now, what were some of, we said that some of the good things about trait theory were that it's pretty intuitive, right? It's easy. It's straightforward, and we like that. We like to be able to categorize. We like to be able to define, okay, these are the 5 things. Our world today, we love top 5 lists, 7 things to do. Trait theory gives us that. So we like that about it. But what's one of the negative things that we said about trait theory? What's missing?
It ignores the situation.
Ignores the situation. Okay, so I'm going to kind of do a little arrow like this. Ignores situation, what else about trait theory did we say? We're missing something.
It's not like a defined list. It's an endless list of traits.
Yeah, I like that. It's endless. So you don't really get to a firm answer.
And it doesn't look at results.
Okay. Not focused. I'm going to say focused on outcomes / results. So again, it's kind of based on, okay, if someone's charismatic, do you think they're a good leader? It doesn't really look at, well, then does the leader accomplish what they say they're going to do? So along those kind of same lines, because it's not focused on outcomes, what else is missing from the picture? If we're trying to figure out what makes effective leadership, what else are we missing? Let me pose it in a different question. So this very last piece can't be learned. Trait theory said leadership, what makes you a good leader, can't be learned. Do y'all agree with that? Some of you are shaking your head no. Why not? Why don't you agree with that?
You can learn things to make you a better leader, so you can build on your leadership. So if you can learn how to be a better leader, you're still learning how to be a leader.
Okay. So if you're learning about it, like any of that, anything that you do can change how you choose to be as a leader, making you more effective or not. Why else would y'all say, just kind of intuitively, based off of your own experience, and kind of tell me about some of those experiences, why you think leadership can be learned?
I mean, if it could, they wouldn't be holding leadership seminars or training.
If it couldn't, we wouldn't have all of this stuff going on, right? How many of you have attended a leadership workshop before? How many of you have gone to a conference that talked about leadership? How many of you in high school were part of some type of youth leadership program? So could have been a whole organization, or it could have been like your junior year, you go to the Capitol. A lot of it, okay? So we have a lot of stuff. That ties into what chapter 3 is all about. And it really does take this notion of, okay, trait theory says everything is pretty much stable. You are who you are. But based off of our experiences of just dealing with people day in and day out, we're just not sure that that's true. So how else can we try to define effective leadership? Well, let's figure out what can be learned. So if that's like the first principle, like maybe we agree that our personality doesn't change, but we don't agree with the fact that leadership can't be learned. So let's try to explain this in another way. That's what skills theory really is all about, and that's what chapter 3 is all about, which y'all should have read. And so that's what we're going to kind of touch on today, is this idea of skills theory. And to do that, we're going to take some of these experiences that y'all have had and try to really, I think, put some meat to the bone. There's not a whole lot to skill theory. It's pretty simple, but sometimes you can be like, okay, but I don't get what this means. And being able to differentiate the difference between skills theory and trait theory, because some of it, the lines get kind of blurred. So the first thing that I want y'all to do, I don't want y'all to be in more than groups of 3, just because I would really want to make sure today that everyone's involved. But what I would like is that at least one person in your group has a laptop. If they don't, that someone has a smartphone or something like that y'all are going to be able to pull some stuff up on the internet for me. So if you would, please put yourself in groups of 3.
I do not.
All right. So I'm going to pop back over here. Can y'all see this okay if I write on this chalkboard, or is it too far away? We'll stick with this chalkboard then. I had y'all raise your hands about whether you have participated in leadership programs before. And I kind of before class just kind of brainstormed a few leadership programs that I know about. So kind of going to this idea of, all right, we think that leadership can be learned. So we do trainings and seminars and workshops for it. And so one that I thought of right off the bat is the Oklahoma Ag Leadership Program. Any of y'all ever heard of that? OALP? Okay. Tell us what do you know about it, Gage?
I don't know, but they send the managers to go off there. I know they go to like Washington, D.C., look at different sides of ag, like anti-ag. I think sometimes they go overseas, don't they?
Yeah. So this is actually like a 2-year program. It's a pretty big commitment. And so what they do is they get a group, usually about 20 to 25 people that are in Oklahoma agriculture. It's actually sponsored, like OSU Extension, along with Department of Ag, kind of put the funds behind it to put this program together. And it's 2 years of people in ag learning about the industry, going overseas, going to D.C. But it's a 2-year leadership program for professionals. A lot of states do similar programs to this. Just where they're ran is different. The one here in Oklahoma is ran through Extension. Welcome to class, Calvin. You missed it, but the first few minutes I put your... Do you have a copy of this?
No, I don't.
Here. All for you.
Appreciate it.
First front page of the sports. You're welcome, sir. But almost every state has one. In Alabama, it's ran through the Farm Bureau organization. In Florida, where I was from, the university put it through with some private sponsors, but similar to that. Another one that I thought of, and maybe y'all may know about this one or you may not, it's called Leadership Stillwater. How many of y'all's hometowns have a leadership program for adults? Okay, a couple. So usually it's a year, again, kind of this cohort idea, year-long program for people in the community to learn more about their city. And usually it's ran by the city government. That's what Leadership Stillwater is. Then I thought about Farm Bureau. Anyone not familiar with what Farm Bureau is? Somebody share what Farm Bureau is.
So they're like an ad-based like insurance company all around.
So
They host like several different types of leadership performances. Some of them that used to be like Southwest Oklahoma. For like they do a lot kind of like along the lines of like AFR kind of stuff.
Yeah. So there's the American Farm Bureau, and they have an insurance side, so every state sells insurance, and it based off of this need of agriculturalists or rural communities needing insurance. But then they also have what's called a federation side, and that's where they do a lot of their policies. So they're really big on the political side of advocating for agriculture, what have you. Neat little fact, if you don't know a whole lot about Extension offices actually kind of started out of our Bureau offices. They were together. It's kind of a cool thing to think about. So like we've always kind of been connected as land grants to Farm Bureau as well. Then I thought about how many of y'all were members of FFA? Okay, tons of leadership conferences, right? I picked out just 2. There's FFA New Century Farmer, which is for students your age. And then we have the Washington Leadership Conference, and I'm going to just kind of make it brief there. And I meant to say this Farm Bureau one, they have an actual women's leadership program, so specifically for that. I want y'all in your groups of 3 to kind of share with each other what are some of the other leadership programs that maybe you've participated in. And again, it can be you went to a conference or you went to a training, and it doesn't have to be ag related, but what was something you went to that said, this is a leadership training program. It's going to make you a leader by participating in it. So share with each other what you've done. Yeah, and Calvin, if you'll join their group and just be here before them.
I was really involved in textbook
After you've shared, so y'all should have just real briefly kind of shared what the names of the programs are. I want you to choose one. And if you aren't really sure about one of the programs that y'all shared, feel free to grab one of these that maybe I've written up here on the board. But what I want y'all to do, and this should only take literally like 3 minutes max. I want you to pull up the website for the program that you attended, or again, y'all can look at one of these. It's up to you. But what I want you to do is look at their website or whatever it is that's marketing it, and what does it say the outcomes of this program are going to be? What does it say you're going to do in this program? All right, so what are the activities? A lot of times they'll say, here's the outline for the 3 days. These are the type of activities you're going to do, and when you leave here, here's what you should be able to get from this. So choose just one in your group. Take about 3 quick minutes to kind of look that up and see what's said about it. What are y'all looking up?
So I went to a Greek life conference over the summer with the NIC.
Okay.
I think we decided that because we all kind of like very outside of that is like alumni camp, ALD, state
all
convention.
pretty basic.
Yeah. No, good. I'm glad you're looking at something different because not everybody does 4-H and FFA. So sometimes those examples don't resonate with other people. So I think that's good. What did y'all choose back here?
Farmers and ranchers.
Okay, perfect. But that's kind of like an organization. So what's a conference? And not so much like a business conference, but like specific like training and development type conference.
We went to the national, like the YFR, like the national convention deal in Reno.
Yeah.
And like there's different ones, and part of them is like were like leadership. Like you could pick
different workshops.
Right.
Yeah, and some of them were leadership.
So look specifically at those workshops then. But what I would encourage you to do is try to find like a more specific, and you could maybe even say like Young Farmers and Rangers is supposed to be kind of a leadership. I've been involved with it a whole lot since I was 18. It's supposed to be kind of a leadership development program just by membership in and of itself. But I really want you to kind of focus in on something that has targeted outcomes and such. And so maybe look at some of those leadership workshops that you went to. What did they say? By going to that 1 hour workshop, what were you going to do and what was the purpose of it? What y'all choose over here?
LEAD. It's like the Angus Leadership Conference.
Okay, perfect. What do y'all have?
We are doing JROTC.
Awesome. What are y'all looking at?
SCCLA.
Okay, what specifically?
No.
Oh, it's like, what do you mean? Like we're just looking
Like
at
leadership
specific,
training, development program.
Well,
Yeah.
we were just looking at like what their thing is, and so we got their mission statement right there and the motto and their purposes of their program.
Yeah. Well, look to see like, okay, FCCLA, does it offer, so programs, look at programs. So, do they have, like a student leader workshop or a weekend-long training kind of thing, that kind of stuff. What'd y'all choose back here?
We chose like back home, there's a student leadership for our district. So they pull you out of school and send you. It's not just FFA, but or cheerleader head people or something. The teachers will send them there for the day, and they build on core values and networking, making decisions, demonstrating trustworthiness, inspiring and being inspired by others, increasing confidence in communication.
Okay, perfect. All right, and y'all got your examples?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I know that's kind of brief, but what I want to do now, and I'm going to erase this on the board, so if you guys can jot this down as a quick reminder. No problem. Get with me afterwards, but that kind of helps y'all remind it. So what I want to do is I want to kind of compare what it says. I don't want to say necessarily it's core beliefs are, but what it says the outcomes are going to be versus the activities. So you're going to come to this training, and what are you going to learn? So y'all kind of just shout out to me, what are some of the things that y'all saw that by attending this thing, you're going to learn what?
Skills.
What kind? Okay, so it flat out said people skills. What were some words it used to make you think that? Did anybody talk about communication?
Yeah.
Okay, so it said you'll be able to communicate. What were some other things it said you were going to learn? Networking. What else? Performance, and then inspired what?
Inspiring being inspired by others.
Okay, so you're going to get some inspiration. Walk away feeling good. What else?
Maybe learning how to step out of your comfort zone.
Okay, so step out of comfort zone. Okay.
Goal setting.
Huh?
Goal setting.
Goal setting. What else? Say that again.
Perspectives, changing
Perspectives. Okay. I'm going to pull up the website for one of these just for us to look at real quick. I probably should have done this right before class started. But a good one that I looked at that I thought was pretty cool, that I think is going to help give us a good example. I am going to use an FFA example here. FFA has I always have to remember where stuff is. They redid their stuff. They have a bunch of conferences that they offer to members that are part of FFA, and one of the big conferences is Washington Leadership Conference. Anybody go to that as a student? Awesome. One of my favorite experiences. And I mean, it is called the Washington Leadership Conference, right? And if you look at, it talks here, what will my students learn? It's based on the 4 tenets of me, we, do, and serve. So it's helping students become engaged citizens. And for the me part, they take you to the Arlington National Cemetery. The we part, they want students to understand who they are and have purpose statements. They want students to know how to be advocates. And then they want them to take part of a service project. So I would say for this conference, for WLC, some of their outcomes would be advocacy, right? They mentioned that. Purpose. They want people to have purpose statements. And then citizenship. They want people to be involved. So now, looking at your organizations or programs that y'all looked up, how did it describe it was going to help you learn these things? What were y'all going to do?
So an important sentence on the conference I went, it said through exploration of critical issues and thought-provoking activities, the program is intended to help you identify the leader you want to be, make the most impact in your chapter and also community.
Okay, so I like that. Explore issues. was one way. What else?
This one had leadership theory and application.
So they do discuss theory. What else? The group that had the program for leaders in your community or your district, what were some of the things that are part of the program?
It doesn't really say on here, but I was a part of it. So we did like with just our school. So I guess this is like the bigger one for the district, but just our school, we did like rock climbing and like just team building to where you use your perspective.
Well, and I'm even going to just kind of call that all fun activities. You know, just we're going to go do ropes course. We're going to do all this stuff. WLC tours, right? Like it mentions you're going to go to the Arlington Cemetery. We're going to go to the museum. We're going to do service projects. If I were to pull up the website, say for Leadership Stillwater or any program that is kind of like a county or city-led leadership program, what do y'all think those activities normally are? Going to the police department, learning about the fire department, learning about how the library runs, learning about nonprofit organizations in the community, right? So kind of these like seminars almost. So what is something that all of these programs may have in common? So when we look at this idea of what are the outcomes, what are they trying to do, and how are they doing it, what is something similar between all of them? Leadership theory?
No.
We're going to start giving them around.
Are there classes that start at 9:30? Like I'm super confused.
I think it's Monday.
Monday, yeah.
Oh, good call. Oh, that sucks. That's really funny. Okay. I mean, that's just weird that like it's happened twice already. So.
Three times.
Three times.
The third one last time.
That's so weird. Okay. So back to it. What are some commonalities you see here? Or how would you describe this? Like regardless of the program that your group looked up. What
targeted for like youth, youth development, team building, kind of getting youth really to work together to find different leadership techniques during their younger years.
Yeah, so a lot of programs are focused on youth. I think that's a really good point. And this idea that if we can help them learn these things now, they're going to be better citizens later. What's something else, though?
I think all of these are really heavily focused on networking.
That's a really good point, yes.
Whether that's like within your state or like on a national level or something, you're going to connect with other people because of the environment you're in.
Yeah, so a lot of these programs do focus on just getting people to interact, network with each other. What's missing?
Well, going back to the one that the FA one that you pulled out where it said lead, I feel like I don't really see that.
So sometimes, and this is just playing devil's advocate, sometimes you look at these leadership programs and what they say the outcomes are, the activities that you're actually doing in them don't really correlate with what they say the outcome is, right? So I'm going to just use Leadership Stillwater as an example. Like it says, you are going to be a part of this leadership program if you want to be a leader in your community. And so to help you become a leader in your community, we're going to meet with the fire chief, meet with the police chief. We're going to go to the library. How is that? Is that helping them develop leadership skills? That's just informative. So what's really, you think, the goal of a program like Leadership Stillwater? Or
like aware.
Huh?
Be able to talk about it with somebody else.
To be aware, to be able to talk with other people about things going on in your community. I would even say it goes back to that idea of citizenship. They really just want people to be more involved in their community. So if you know what's going on in your community, you can serve on the local board, the school board, what have you, right? And what is that saying leadership is? Positional, right? Kind of something to think about here as we kind of talk about skills theory. The reason why we bring this up is that we have a lot of programs. We have a lot of trainings that are going to use the word leadership in it. But we've got to say, are we really teaching leadership? Or are we trying to get engagement, citizenship, what have you? So we need to start kind of looking at those things critically. But it all bases back to this idea of skill theory. And skill theory is this idea that leadership can be learned. And just know I'm not saying that it's wrong, because we all have different ways of defining leadership, right? Before we can have like the most effective, phenomenal leaders in a community, we just need people to be involved first, right? So if they become leaders just by virtue of being more involved, at least we've got some people stepping up to the plate, right? So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just kind of really understanding more the premise of what's behind it. So skills approach, that's what this is all about. Chapter 3 really kind of brought up two big skill-based models. And I'm going to be honest with you, we're going to just focus on Kat's today, his skill model, because really this other one, it's really easy. Mumford's is easy to fit into it, but there's also a lot of pieces. And kind of my opinion, I think Mumford just tries to make it more complicated than what it really is. But the skills approach, and this is 1955, is when this idea was kind of brought up. Again, this idea that leadership can be learned. And so it's really this perspective, again, moving away from trait theory about just defining someone's personality and characteristics. Skills approach is really about how do we use one's knowledge and competencies to accomplish the goals that a group has. So, again, some would argue skills approach is really focused on that intelligence trait and getting more specific with that intelligence trait, but it's a little bit more holistic than that. And it goes beyond the idea of trait theory because it says it's something that can be learned. We can increase someone's knowledge, we can increase their competency, and if we can do that, we can make them a better leader. All right? And so still things to remember about it, we're still just focused on the leader. We're not talking about followers yet at all. And again, skills and abilities. With a raise of hands, just based off of this definition, how many of y'all would say, I think I'm going to like skill theory more than I liked trait theory? Raise your hand if that's you. How many of you are still skeptical that you're like, I'm just not convinced that knowledge or abilities can be learned? Who's in that? Who's a little skeptical? It's okay to be, I'm skeptical, to be honest. How many of y'all don't want to raise your hands in front of the whole class? Thanks for being honest, Jonathan. Appreciate it. So, 3 skills. 3 skills to remember. Skills theory says that as a leader, as people, as humans, we all have technical skills, human skills, and conceptual skills. And we're going to kind of define what these 3 are. Okay? So, here's kind of an overall chart. Katz says, and with all of his research, he looked at all different levels of management, administrators, to the frontline workers, right? And said, okay, across the board, with these 3 skills, depending on where you're at in the management level or in the leadership level, you're going to need different amounts of different skills. So we have the 3 levels he looks at: top, middle, and supervisory. All right? And again, he says it kind of changes. So the first one that I want to look at here is this idea of a technical skill. So technical skills would be being able to do what you need to do to get the job done, right? Hands-on. Usually seen pretty important to these lower levels of management. So if we just look at the technical skills here, are there any technical skills that y'all listed for outcomes of y'all's leadership programs? Not really. But now let's think back. Think back to your programs that y'all picked in your groups. Can you think of any technical skills that might be taught in your programs? Several of you had agriculture-based programs. Was there any part of the program that talked about ag knowledge of any type? That was learning about an industry, learning about these issues, what have you? What was?
This one was definitely targeted like the beef industry in the future as
So, industry, we'll just kind of call it like overall industry knowledge, regardless of what industry it is.
Isn't knowledge more of a conceptual?
We'll get there. We'll kind of define what that conceptual is. Were there any like very practical workshops that were offered as a part of the programs?
I think sometimes, so like, okay, this summer, one of my co-workers got sent to like the Ag Media Summit. And so like that's a big communications hub. And she was talking about how the outcomes of her like breakout sessions, she was hoping they would be more technical and that they would target her, like she wanted to learn skills that she needed to know. Instead, they're more like umbrella type of sessions, and they're just talking about the whole like mushy-gushy like leadership type of, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of times in these type of like environments, they just target your inspiration skills, not like, we're going to teach you how to do this, this, and this. So if you don't walk out of here with these 3 skills, it's not like that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And so kind of stick with that thought when we get to talking about human and conceptual skills. Now, I'll kind of give a counter example to that. When I lived in Florida and grew up, our FFA put on summer camps, but we would have a Florida Leadership Adventures camp, and then we would have another one called Florida Outdoor Adventures. And in the evening, we'd do the leadership-y type of stuff. But during the day, we would learn how to cook over a campfire. We'd learn how to shoot bow and arrows. Any of y'all ever go to stuff like that growing up? Like little 3-day 4-H camps or what have you? I definitely walked away with some technical skills from that. So there are some. It just kind of, again, depends on their purpose. All right? What do y'all notice, though, in the amounts of technical skills that are needed for different management levels?
It's definitely needed more in a supervisory role.
Okay. Why do y'all think that is?
Because they're the ones actually putting out the product of whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
The one actually doing all the work, more or less.
Yeah. What about middle management? And how would y'all describe middle management? Like, who are those people?
I think like of a manager trainee, like you're not fully manager, but you're learning.
Okay.
I think of like a location manager.
A location manager, yeah.
Or like a department.
Department, yeah. So I'm going to kind of give y'all a hierarchy that because my context has always been teaching in college, like this is always kind of what's in my head with like what's going on, and I can make it as specific to this class, or I could just do my job overall. But I'll say for this class. For this class, the top management for this Ag Leadership class would probably be who? Bill and Penny, right? They're the head faculty of the Ag Leadership program. I'm really, as an instructor and a PhD student, for this class, maybe like middle manager, right? Like I have more direct contact every class day with y'all than Bill and Penny do right now. Who would probably be in this management supervisory role? Miss Cammie Grace, our master's TA. Okay, so that's kind of a hierarchy there. All right, so just kind of think about that as we go through. So, for right now, why do y'all think technical skills are really mostly needed by these 2 levels versus the top management? Why do top managers not need so much technical skill?
They're more of like over the whole thing and not on one task or over one department.
I like that. So they're not really there doing that day in, day out. So that's something to remember here. All right, when it comes to technical skills, needed most by that middle or supervisory level, not so much by the top. So then we go to human. So this is the ability to work with people. So whereas technical skills, and this is something to write down, you want to know these differentiations. Technical skills are how things work. Human skills are all about how people work. Okay? What do y'all notice about human skills?
It's needed.
Remains constant.
Oh, I was gonna say it's needed through all three.
It's needed through all three. Why? Why do all three need to know how people work? Everyone's people? Everyone's working with people. What were you going to say, Leslie?
Well, no matter what level you're at, you're still interacting with a variety of people.
Yeah. So regardless if you're the top management or in that lower level role, you're working with people. You're usually trying to get people to work together, achieving some type of goal. I really like this idea of creating an atmosphere of trust and empowerment. A lot of this is going back to how do we define leadership, right? So even if someone may be a manager, they're leading a group of people. So what Kat's found is that this human skill, this ability to know how people work, is really important for all three levels. Kind of differentiates it there. So to kind of highlight that, there's the human skill, pretty constant, needed for everything. So conceptual skills. So Gage brought up this idea that, well, isn't knowledge conceptual? We call it technical in this model because conceptual skills are how ideas work. So not so much about knowledge and knowing how to do things and how things work. It's more about kind of idea generation. So being able to think through things, come up with new ideas for things. Policies, issues, what do things stand for? It's a little bit more abstract than factual information, right? So if we're needing to look at people having factual information, we usually lump that under technical skills. But we need people to have conceptual skills. And where do we see conceptual skills most important? Higher levels of management. So let's go with this. Why do we see lower levels at the supervisory level?
Because they don't need to come up with ideas. They just need to work out the ideas.
Right.
They just need to do a control.
They don't really need to understand how the ideas work. They just need to know how things work, right? And also how people work so that they can get stuff done. But as far as the day-to-day stuff, no. That's not the case. And again, this is what his model says. So conceptual, mainly focused on top management here. So kind of looking back, and I'm going to leave this chart up here overall to look at. Let's go back to y'all's outcomes that you identified. What are some of the human skills that y'all identified?
Well, people skills,
Networking. Huh?
Inspiration.
That's half and half. I'm going to lean a little bit more towards conceptual for that one. So I'm going to underline it and say that inspiration's conceptual.
perspectives.
I would say perspectives is definitely a human skill. Huh? Citizenship.
Stepping out of comfort zone.
I could definitely see that. So what would be,
Also be technical.
huh?
Citizenship could also be technical.
Why would you argue that?
Because there's a lot of different facets to being a citizen. You have your, voting, participating in different things, and also just knowing how everything works. Knowing how your city works and your county and your state and so on. and just like being an active citizen. Like I did a program that's government sponsored in undergrad, and it was all about like empowering citizens and like
how to get involved in the city.
Like,
and
it's in a part of the nation. It stretches kind of like through the starts in Alabama and goes up through like the West Virginia and stuff, and it's all about teaching these kids who are in historically like impoverished areas how to interact with other people and be a good citizen. And some of the examples we used in our place where we worked was the kid was really involved in 4-H, but just going and building connections between the city leaders and then the kids.
So it was focused on the how-to.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big thing. You've got to figure out for some of these that distinction within the program, right? Are they teaching how to do something? Are they teaching how people work, how ideas work, how to create new ideas to encourage citizenship, what have you? I think that's a good part. What things would y'all say are conceptual? So are how ideas work, are focused on helping people learn to think about ideas better?
Your purpose.
Purpose, yeah.
Goal setting?
Goal setting, absolutely. Because when you said goal setting, I was like, oh, I wish you had said vision, right? Because it all kind of ties together, some of that. What else? I would even argue to say that if you go to something and they work with you on developing your vision, that's conceptual, but then when they work on setting goals to accomplish your vision, that may be a little bit more technical, I could say. Anything else that you would say is conceptual?
Would industry knowledge?
I would say industry knowledge would be technical, because those are facts, right? Kind of knowing how things work. Where would advocacy fit? If you're going somewhere and the outcome is for you to become an advocate, Peyton, what type of skill would that be? How to be an advocate. What does that tell you?
So you have to be knowledgeable about it to advocate for it.
So probably technical. So you got to be knowledgeable about it to be an advocate. So advocacy could kind of be one of those technical skills. That's part of it. So again, something to think about when y'all look at these leadership programs and trainings and opportunities. I'm not saying don't do it. I say absolutely do it. But realize a lot of these are developed off of this idea of a skills-based model. And what it's saying is that probably you're coming into this program on this supervisory level, right? So you've probably got good technical knowledge and you've probably got good human skills. So if you want to move up as a leader, because again, kind of another thing assumed in this model is that to be an effective leader, you need to move up levels as a leader. Or, you can still be effective here, but ideally, if you're increasing your leadership abilities, you're gaining more skills. And so, what should these programs really focus more on if you're wanting to kind of increase your trajectory as a leader? Conceptual skills. But sometimes they fall short of that. I would kind of argue that it may be because a lot of times we create these programs kind of how they've always been done, and we really don't think about, well, why were they developed the way they were to begin with? We just kind of keep doing what's always been done. So again, this is another one of those cool things that is a little cheesy, but it's why we study leadership theory, is because there's theory ultimately behind a lot of what we do. Sometimes we just haven't taken the time to really think about it, or we just keep doing it because it's what we saw some other people doing. One thing I do like about this model, though, is that it doesn't say to be an effective leader, you have to end up being a top management leader. It's saying that if you want to be effective at the level you're currently at, this is the mix of skill set that you need to be effective. And so I think that's pretty cool, too. Does everybody want to be a top manager in their company? No. And that's perfectly fine. So if you're at that middle management level, would you say most people want to be good at least where they're at and be more effective? Absolutely. So I think it's kind of cool that it gives that perspective to things. And again, it kind of focuses a little bit more, and we're going to jump through because, like I said, I don't really like this additional one. But, it gives a little bit more meat to the bone when it comes to what makes effective leadership. And so it starts to give us some structure. I like how Northouse says that. Again, traits, we kind of found that it's this endless list, right? Whereas, this model, the skills model, there's 3 skills, right? And for the most part, we can take anything that can be learned about leadership and we can probably fit it into one of those 3 categories, right? So a little bit more structured. I like this idea. It's available to everyone. All right? So rather than saying trait theory said, here's the personality traits that make an effective leader, think back to your big 5. Here's these 5 personality characteristics, and if you're over here, you might be more effective, but if you're over here, not so much, you're probably not going to be a good leader. That's not what skills theory says, right? It allows that room for growth and development depending on where you're at in leadership. Okay, so again, another thing too is it's a little bit more expansive. So it's not just focused on personal characteristics. It's focused on knowing how things work, how people work, and then knowing how ideas work. So from a learning standpoint, it's pretty cool because it incorporates different domains of learning as well. Okay? And again, a lot of leadership education programs are focused in that. Here's an interesting question for y'all. Is a major in ag leadership a skills theory-based program? Is a degree in ag leadership just a 4-year leadership education workshop? Just think on that. It's kind of an interesting conversation sometimes with people. So here are some criticisms. What are some things, how about before we get to criticisms, what are some things you don't like, y'all don't like about skills theory? What else is missing? Again, big picture, we are trying to figure out what makes effective leadership and what makes an effective leader. What is missing in the equation if we use skill theory to answer that question? Still not looking at followers at all. So kind of going back to that idea of context too, right? Like if I am a top manager at a Ford plant, is that the same as being the top manager at a university? So being kind of a provost or president of a university? No, we would say like probably different skills needed, right? So it's still kind of hard to take skills theory and let it be a blanket theory of effective leadership for every single situation. So, and with that, it doesn't talk about followers. So we still haven't even looked at, okay, so we say that an effective top manager doesn't need a whole lot of technical skills, but they need human skills, they need conceptual skills. Do followers agree with that? We don't really know, right? So we're still missing some stuff there. What else is missing? You go to a leadership program that's a 2-day workshop in Oklahoma City. And the outcome is to make you a leader in your community. And y'all talk about the importance of having a vision for your community. You talk about the components of a vision statement. You talk about what changes you want to see in your community. And you leave there. What's missing? You go back to your community, you get a group of people together, and then you realize what? You don't know how to do it. So we're still missing a behavior piece. Okay? So we're still describing leadership and describing an effective leader, but we're not really getting to the heart of, well, how are they doing it? Okay? So I say that a middle manager needs all 3 of those skills to be an effective middle manager. But how? What does that actually look like? Again, when we start considering people being involved in different contexts, how does that work? So, again, I want y'all to really be thinking about these theories critically. Like, not everything's perfect about them. So again, these skills, because we're still kind of describing, it doesn't really give us a good blueprint to say, okay, Gage, you want to go back and in your co-op you want to be a leader. Here's how to do it. It's still kind of more trait-based. Jonathan, it really likes you today. You don't like it? Okay, I'll move it a little bit. That's better. I don't know. It doesn't like me today either, obviously. There we go. So it's still a little bit trait-like. Okay, but what I want y'all to know about skill theory is that on Thursday we're going to talk about behavior theory. That's what chapter 4 is all about. And skill theory is kind of that bridge between trait, who the leader is, and what the leader does. And that bridge is trying to describe what can be learned. Okay, so that's the big differentiation there. Trait theory was who the leader is. Behavior theory is what the leader does. Skill theory is the bridge between those two by helping us figure out what can be learned. And what skill theory says can be learned are what 3 types of skills?
Human, technical, and conceptual.
Human, technical, and conceptual. Those skills can be learned. And so it's worth having education programs and trainings because we can help people learn those skills. All right, so it's pretty cool. So what we're going to do in the last 15 minutes of class is another case study. All right, so in your groups of 3 that y'all have been in, I've got another quick case study for y'all. Just like we did on Thursday, read this case study as a group, and then we're going to chat about the 3 questions on the back, okay? Pretty short one, so it shouldn't take y'all too much time to read through it as a group. Does everybody want their own copy? Would y'all prefer? You good? Anybody else want to? No. Oh. I was going to say, they can have one, or if everybody in the group wants a copy, there should be enough.
Can we get one more from you? Thank you. Y'all just want to read it and then like